Three outfielders were listed as possible trade candidates for the Cincinnati Reds, but only one of them would be a clear upgrade.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Reds podcast. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network in the country. We thank you for making that happen with us. And Locked On Reds is your team every single day, your Reds every single day. And my name is Jeff Carr. I'm a lifelong Cincinnati Reds fan, and I've been hosting this podcast now for 7 seasons, bringing you takes you won't see anywhere else. On today's podcast, the Reds have been labeled as a good fit for Luis Robert Jr., Jarren Duran, and Byron Buxton. I'm going to tell you why Duran is clearly the best of those, and a lot of it would have to do with what it would cost to get any one of those three. Also, to finish out today's podcast, Todd Welter from Locked On White Sox joins me to nail down just how much Luis Robert Jr.'s market has changed, and spoiler alert, it hasn't changed all that much, although there is an interesting caveat that the Reds could pursue for a deal. That's all in today's episode that is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. All right, ESPN came out with an article that was a collaboration between Jeff Passan and Kylie McDaniel, where they talked about the top trade candidates on the market this season, or at least guys who have rumors surrounding them at some point this offseason. And the Reds have been listed as fits for 3 outfielders. Not that they have contacted these teams per se, but that these trades would make sense. And Jarren Duran is the clear favorite among the 3. It's Jarren Duran, Byron Buxton, and Luis Robert. If you had told me, Jeff, pick one of those 3, I'm picking Jarren Duran. And there's a lot of reasons as to why. Now, granted, all 3 of these guys would be upgrades in some way. I think you could make the argument that Luis Robert would be the slimmest margin of upgrades of the 3 players, but I think that Jarren Duran is clearly an upgrade on anything that the Reds have had in the outfield for years. I mean, for the last 3 seasons, he's been good. He was really good in 2024 as he finished in the top 10 MVP voting, and he had an 8.7 WAR that year. Last year, he came down a little bit, but 4.7 WAR would still be one of the best players on the Reds roster, bar none. And at the plate, he's been equally as impressive. In 2024, he actually led all of baseball in doubles and triples. So, yes, everybody that really likes to agree with the Barry Larkin take of homers are rally killers, guess what? Jarren Duran isn't the biggest home run guy. He does a lot of extra base hitting, but it ain't necessarily of the 4-bag variety. It's mostly doubles and triples. He had 21 homers in 2024. He had 16 homers in 2025, and he's playing at Fenway, where I feel like you can hit home runs. It's not as if Fenway is this ridiculously pitcher-friendly park, and in fact, he's a lefty, so he's got that short porch in right field. So it's not as if he's got some sort of excuse that he's playing in a pitcher's ballpark here. So I think that he's the type of guy that is just a good overall hitter. Last season had a 114 OPS plus. We've talked about this before. That would lead the Reds lineup as far as OPS plus is concerned. And when you talk about his contract situation, it is the most favorable of the 3 guys mentioned between Buxton, Robert, and Duran. Duran is under control for 3 years, including this season. He's already avoided arbitration with the Red Sox at $7.7 million for next season. He is under arbitration for 2 more seasons. That is so, and that's going to drive up his trade price a little bit, but it's going to be worth it because we know who he is. And I think that there are some people that have asked the question about, he does have some off the field concerns, not anything that is like, unsavory or anything like that. He is dealt with some mental health things, but I don't think that is an issue. I think that he has worked through that. He has overcome that. And so I'm not looking at that as a reason to not go for trade or not go trade for Jarren Duran. I think that this would be one of the best moves the Reds could make. You could argue it's just as good as Kyle Schwarber, although you would have to trade players in the deal. We'll talk about what these trades might cost here in just a minute, because when I look at Jarren Duran, the reason that I think he is over Byron Buxton is twofold. Byron Buxton is twice as expensive. He's going to be making $15 million next year. He does have 3 years left on his contract, but he will also be 33 years old. He is going to make $15 million next year, $15 million in 2027, and $15 million in 2028. That's all guaranteed. There's no options or anything like that. So that's what he's owed, $45 million over the next 3 years. And on top of that, we're talking about a guy who, yes, when he is on the field, man, he's a game changer. Had a really good year last year. He played in 126 ball games. That's the second most games played he's had in a single season in his career. That's where I want to focus on this, because Byron Buxton has played in the league now for 11 seasons. 3 of those, he has played in more than 100 games. Just 3. That's 8 seasons. And, you know, I begrudge his first year, he was called up for a cup of coffee. So, okay. 7 seasons where he was counted upon to be a guy to play every day, and he was nowhere close to that. In fact, when you look at, when you discount the call-up year, 2015, and you say, okay, the rest of his career, he was counted on to be a guy for the Twins. In those 7 seasons, he never played more than 92 ball games. He has dealt with injuries all of his career, and it's because he is a very aggressive player. He is a very athletic player, very fast player, does everything flashy, and it's amazing, and it's so much fun to watch. I have no doubt that if he were a Cincinnati Red, I would love him. I'd be all in on him. But what it would cost to get him now, and what you would have to give up, and the fact that the Reds would still have to clear money in order to make this work, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. There was an actual proposed deal that we'll get into in a little bit, which is what scares me. But even considering, all right, last season, 126 ball games. 2024, he played 102 ball games. That's 2 years in a row of over 100. 2023, 85 games. 2022, 92 games. 2021, 61 games. We won't count 2020. Obviously, can't go over 62 or 60 ball games. 87 games in 2019, 28 games in 2018. I mean, you go back a long ways, guy has just not been on the field. And as much as you can point to power, speed, all of the things that he has, availability is the best ability, in my opinion. If he's not going to be on the field, then how is this a big upgrade? It's a big upgrade for a percentage of the season. I would much rather have Jarren Duran than Byron Buxton. And then you also look at Luis Robert. For a minute, I thought we were done with this rumor. If you remember an article that Gordon Whitmire had back in February, it was talking about how ridiculous the trade demands had gotten from the White Sox side. This is not something that the Reds are scoffing at. I think it was made mention at the trade deadline that the Reds turned down a potential deal with the Diamondbacks to get Eugenio Suarez because of the amount of cash that would be heading back from the Reds to the Diamondbacks. And that seemed kind of strange. That's not what this is. The White Sox are asking for the moon, the stars, and Mars. I don't know what the metaphor is here, but they're asking for everything to get Luis Robert. And Luis Robert is owed $20 million this year because his club option was picked up by the White Sox, and he has a club option for 2027 for $20 million. If you're the Reds, you're looking at this as a one-year guy because the Reds don't pick up $20 million club options. They just don't. Unless he went crazy, which over the last 2 years, him going crazy would be giving back to league average. Because in 2024, he had an 86 OPS plus. In 2025, he had an 85 OPS plus. So 2024, we talked about the rumors last offseason. Like, man, he sort of had a down year in 2024. He got worse in 2025. So I have a hard time saying, yes, go get Luis Robert. Because we know what it'll cost, and it just seems like it's too much. So Jarren Duran is the guy of these three fits, according to Jeff Passan and Kylie McDaniel from ESPN, the Reds are, good fits for a couple of outfielders. Go get Jarren Duran. That would be awesome. So, on top of these guys' profiles, there's a very different level of cost and value involved with each trade candidate. As the NFL season is into its stretch run, you can check out the live action that's over on FanDuel. When you're talking about games are kicking off, you've got teams scoring, point spreads are moving around. I keep looking at this Bengals-Bills game. The point spread right now is Bengals are underdogs by 5.5 points. I feel like if the Bengals get scored on first, if the Bills go up 7-0 early, then that line's going to move to a place where I'm going to be comfortable with it, because I feel like the Bengals are still a bit of an enigma. Their defense seems to be improved, but quite frankly, how can you not be improved with how bad they've been? But I don't know. Like, they're in must-win territory every single week. So I think they're going to be a fun team to live bet. You could also look at the pregame line for the Browns and the Titans. Somehow the Browns are only favored by 3.5. I feel like the Browns are just going to smash the Titans. And I just complimented the Browns, so I'm done with that. Anyway, you can check out so many different things over on FanDuel, especially in the live betting area, and get in on the action every single week, even Thursday night's ball game, of course, as well. All on FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app today. Thank you for making Locked On Reds part of your everyday routine. If you're an everydayer out there, you rock. And if you're not an everydayer, hit that subscribe button right here on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, because we are free and available everywhere you get your podcasts. All right, so what'll it cost, man? What'll it cost? Talk about these three outfielders, and any one of them, it's going to be a trade package that if the Reds were to get it done, we'd be like, ooh, okay, that's interesting. Because none of these guys are the typical, like, Nick Krall specials, right? I don't say this to bash on Nick Krall. I just say this, he has a type, all right? Nick Krall has a type. When it comes to acquiring players, he's looking for the broken down dude, the dude who's had a couple of rough years that he could probably get on the cheap, and hopefully the Reds will get him fixed. And this season, this next coming season, is his best season yet. That's what he did with Austin Hayes. That's what he's done with countless guys. That's not what any of these guys. You could argue that Luis Robert is, but the White Sox are not making that argument. The White Sox are very much of the no, you're gonna pay for this guy thought process. So none of these guys fall under the typical Nick Krall trade variety. But for me, Jarren Duran has the best mix of him being a clear upgrade for the team and how much it would cost to get him. Not that he'll be the cheapest by any stretch, but that you're going to get the most bang for your buck here, right? Like, it's the holiday season. We're talking about shopping for gifts for people, and what's the best value? Like, this is the best value. Jarren Duran of these three guys is the best value that the Reds could go get. And I think here, this could be an interesting scenario, because the Red Sox are looking for pitching depth in their starting rotation. The Reds have that. They could offer them Brady Singer as a starting point. Now, you will need to package a really decent prospect with Brady Singer to get this done, because Brady Singer just has 1 year of team control left. And I think, because, the Red Sox just acquired Sonny Gray from the Cardinals, starting the whole tear down there in St. Louis. Thank you, Boston. I think it's either a mutual option or a club option, but Sonny Gray isn't under multiple years of guaranteed control. And with Brady Singer not under multiple years of team control or guaranteed control, you would probably need to package a prospect with him that I don't think it would have to be an elite guy, but a very good guy. And I think that Leo Balcazar fits that model. Leo Balcazar's had a very nice Arizona Fall League, just got added to the 40-man roster. It's clear that the Reds value him, and I think that other teams would value him, because that's another reason why you add a guy to the 40-man roster, to protect him from the Rule 5 draft. Had he been exposed, I would expect Leo Balcazar would have gotten picked. So it makes sense that they protected him. But you could put him and Brady Singer together, I think, for a package for Jarren Duran. Could be totally wrong on that one. That could be something that I might be a little bit lowballing on. I'll admit I'm not a general manager. Spoiler alert. So I don't necessarily understand specifics about what people are looking for. But when you consider what the Red Sox have, what they need, and what they would like to get, this feels like a trade offer that they could go for Jarren Duran. And the fact that Jarren Duran has multiple years of guaranteed arbitration team control, maybe you go higher than Leo Balcazar. I would be willing to consider a guy like Tyson Lewis, maybe Chase Petty if they're looking for more pitching depth, like in their farm system. I don't know, but I think that you could get it done with Brady Singer and a decent to very good prospect in this deal. So then comparing that to what we've seen from other things, there actually was a Byron Buxton possible trade proposal, though it was given with the caveat that it's a ridiculous trade proposal, so it most likely won't happen, but it gives us a bit of a baseline of understanding. Anthony Castrovinci of MLB.com wrote this article about possible ridiculous trade ideas that could work, and it's a 3-team deal that sends Byron Buxton to the Cincinnati Reds, sends Brady Singer to the Houston Astros, sends a package of prospects from the Astros to the Twins, and then sends a package of prospects in Tyson Lewis and Mason Neville from the Reds to Minnesota. And in case you're unfamiliar with those names, Tyson Lewis, a shortstop prospect. Doug Gray has him rated in the top 5 prospects in his organization rankings, and I trust Doug the most when it comes to Reds prospects. So if he likes him, I like him. And then Mason Neville, he's an outfield prospect with a lot of power, though he is a little bit lower in the rankings. He's about 25 when it comes to the Reds organization. But I still kind of like Mason Neville for what he brings to the plate. He's an outfielder with power. I find this trade to be too expensive for the Reds. Plus, you have to get rid of Brady Singer in this deal to free up money for Byron Buxton. As we mentioned, Byron Buxton making $15 million a year. And if the Reds only have $20 million to spend and you acquire $15 million without giving up too much money, without freeing up too much money, then you've spent most of your money on one guy who most likely is going to be hurt at some point this year. So it just seems like it's a little bit too much for me. You really have to do some financial finagling to make this work. And I feel like you would be really overstretching yourself I'm just not sure of the return here. Like Byron Buxton, I get it. And I know that there's some people, and I've talked with those people before, who just vehemently disagree with me and find it strange that I don't like the idea of acquiring Byron Buxton, but I don't. I feel like he's not on the field enough. I need a guy that's on the field more. And what it will cost to get him is a lot. Speaking of what it will cost to get him, Luis Robert. Boy, oh boy, this trade rumor feels like it's been all over the map. And I'm going to talk with Todd Welter here in a few minutes just to really nail down what Chris Getz, White Sox general manager, is thinking right now for what he needs for Luis Robert. And it hasn't changed very much, I don't think, but it's been all over the map. I mean, the last that we heard of any Reds interest, Gordon Whitmire wrote an article about this last February as we were getting into spring training, as things were really starting to get going. He wrote last February that the White Sox were actually willing to pay down some of Robert's salary. Now, that was last year's salary of $15 million. They would probably need to pay more down of that. If the Reds weren't comfortable acquiring Luis Robert at $15 million, they're definitely going to be very antsy about acquiring him at $20 million. And so the White Sox were willing to pay some of that down for a better prospect return. And there were multiple trade packages that were being discussed, according to Gordon Whitmire, one of them with Edwin Arroyo and multiple other prospects in the deal. And one of the other trade packages that were being widely discussed included both Chase Burns and Rhett Lauder. Oh boy. I think I kind of side with Steve on this one, where Steve was like, thank the Lord that Nick Krall didn't do this. I'm still there. If that's what the cost is, I'm still very much uninterested in going after Luis Robert, because it just feels like there's too much hope here. Like, sure, you could see him do an Andrew Vaughn, where the White Sox got rid of Andrew Vaughn, the Brewers picked him up, and all of a sudden he figured out how to baseball. But I just don't know, man. There's too much hope involved here. I don't feel like it's an answer. And what you would have to give up to find out if it's an answer or not just feels like too much. So go get Jarren Duran. He's got the best cost to production value of these three fits. The question is, have the White Sox changed their demands? We'll get that answer from our Locked On White Sox host coming up next. I invite you to continue the conversation with me after the show is over. You can follow me at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs. You can also follow Steve at S. Offenbaker with 2 Fs. He's out gallivanting on a cruise ship. I saw he took a picture with the cruise director. Oh, yeah, fun times for Steve out there on the ocean. But you can follow him at S. Offenbaker with 2 Fs. You can also follow Tim Daniel at TimDaniel518. And you can follow Locked On Reds at Locked On Reds. All on X, talking about the Reds all day long. All right, so I got the chance to talk with Todd Welter, kind of trying to figure out what is this market for Luis Robert right now, and boy, seems like it's Groundhog Day when it comes to this rumor.
All right, Jeff, how tired are you of hearing Luis Robert Jr. potentially to the Reds?
To be honest with you, this is the first that I've heard about it this offseason. I know we were inundated with those rumors last offseason, and it felt like it went all the way up to and a little bit through spring training a bit, and then it was shut down by, there were reports that there were some crazy trade demands from the White Sox side, and so then things stopped, and I didn't even hear anything during the trade deadline, and now it's kind of brought back by the ESPN article that links the Reds as a decent fit for Luis Robert. And there's some folks that are starting to reconsider it a little bit, but I would say that he is not in my top 3 of like, oh man, this would be a great move for the Reds this offseason, especially depending on how much it would probably cost to get it.
Yeah, and especially, too, the financial commitment now. I mean, I know last offseason there was talk that the Reds wanted the White Sox to pay down some of his salary, but now he's making $5 million more on that $20 million option. Would that be a hang-up, too, if there was a potential deal on the horizon?
Yeah, because the Reds would need to free up some money for that. They're already looking at, there's so many reports about, oh, the Reds are serious. The Reds have a lot of interest. They really want to go get Kyle Schwarber. But a lot of that has to do with how much money are you going to give him? Because most reports have them around $20 million as far as, spending money is concerned this offseason. So $20 million for Luis Robert, you would have to free up money. You would have to have the White Sox pay down some of that because the Reds also have other moves that they need to make too. So it just kind of feels like the cost as far as money is concerned is already prohibitive in that. And I think too, Todd, this is the other part of this. I don't know that the Reds consider this a multi-year deal. Like, I think that if they were to trade for Luis Robert, I'd be surprised if they pick up that $20 million option. He would have to be his 2023 self for them to pick up that $20 million for 2027.
Yeah, and that's why I actually wanted to talk to you, because there's some Luis Robert Jr. truthers out there, and even the GM of the White Sox that believes, well, we still have club control. We still have that other $20 million option of 2027. We don't have to trade him. But the market has been screaming back that they just view him as a rental because he's only valuable to the White Sox at $20 million, since they don't really have many future options right away in the farm system. They just acquired Everson Pereira, but he's not exactly, going to be an all-star potential like Luis Robert Jr. or play the elite defense. So that's where they are in this situation where they're overvaluing him, when teams like how you're saying, the Reds, the Phillies are all saying, well, he's a rental, so maybe we'll give you Edwin Arroyo. That's it. We're not going to give you Rhett Lauder or Chase Burns.
Let me ask you this. How much do you factor in? Because I think there's been some conversations that I've had over the season with some folks that were just like, well, it's just because he's disenchanted with where he is right now. Like, he moves, he's going to transform. He's going to flip a switch. Like, how much stock do you put into something like that?
So I've heard people that are somewhat connected to the White Sox say he just doesn't like baseball to begin with. And that's one of the reasons why they should have never have paid him. When guys are not motivated, where they're motivated by the money, never pay them then. Play the arb game and then wave bye-bye to them once they get to arbitration. I do think the losing was starting to drag on him. I do think that was starting to get at him. And towards when he started to peak up and have that really good July, that coincided with Colson Montgomery promotion. And then you started to see Luis Robert Jr. all of a sudden like being in the clubhouse. He was, joking around with Colson Montgomery. There was talks of him like giving him nicknames. He was seeming more, enthusiastic. So maybe being around this young core has re-energized him. But I still think one of the reasons why I'm kind of in the camp of the White Sox just need to move on is he's the last remaining piece from that failed rebuild that they had last decade, that dysfunctional stink. And I think that kind of is hard to wear off. Like you saw what happened to Andrew Vaughn in Milwaukee. Once he moved on, he was the best version of himself once he was able to shake that off. So I think that's one of the things that people are missing is maybe does need a change of scenery. Michael Kopech went to the Dodgers, best version of himself before he got hurt. So I think that's one of the reasons why I actually kind of agree with Chris Getz on, hey, I want to get the trade value for his talent, because if he does go to the Reds, for example, and starts, becoming 2023 Luis Robert Jr. again, and all you have to show for it is pennies on the dollar, then yeah, that's going to be a bad trade.
And I think too, like the important thing to note about 2023 Luis Robert, he is so much different that year. He was so much different that year than he has been in the last two seasons. Last two seasons, he's had OPS pluses of 86 and 85. In 2023, he had an OPS plus of 130. It wasn't as if it was like just a little bit above league average. Like it was MVP level. He was just outside the top 10 in the American League. So that is where I think that it's hard to see the Reds putting together a trade package where they will agree. It almost feels like they would be picking up his option for 2027 right now if they make that trade, because they're like, okay, if we do this, this is for multiple years, because there's other guys that they're considering that have either multiple years left on a contract extension that they already signed, i.e. Byron Buxton, or a guy who's under multiple years of arbitration control like Jarren Duran, that if they were to pursue these guys that are considered fits by ESPN, that's kind of what they would be going up against with this. So like going back to an article that Gordon Whitmire had back in February, where he talked about, there were multiple, trade conversations where in one instance, Edwin Arroyo was headed to the White Sox. In another instance, the White Sox were asking for both Chase Burns and Rhett Lauder. And it was like, whoa, dude, like that's a lot. Edwin Arroyo I could kind of see, but I wonder a little bit. So like, thinking of what you have heard on your side, and if you were Chris Getz, is it still we're looking for your two top pitching prospects, or is the Edwin Arroyo side of this plus, other prospects, is that more the way that they would go?
So I think it's still going to be the top five. Two of the top five prospects I still think is his demand, because they would have traded him at the trade deadline had they gotten that offer, I really think. And that was one of the things that Chris Getz hinted at. He's very good at hinting what he's looking at. And he keeps saying and telling like what other GMs are saying on the other side of the phone, where he was saying, well, they're still looking, for pennies on the dollar, but, kind of making it look like they were looking for a bag of baseballs. But I do think that's what he's still trying to. My one hypothesis is why he will get traded this offseason, because he's already come out and said Luis Robert Jr. is going to be on the opening day roster next year. That he's not trying to trade him. The reason why he might trade him is
if he gets blown away.
If he gets blown away, or if there's young major league talent that was still highly regarded at one point that just wasn't given a runway. I got a feeling that could maybe get a deal done. But I don't know if the Reds, going back to you, would have that type of guy. I'm talking about like how they just got Miguel Vargas a few years ago. Or again, they just traded for Everson Pereira, where they gave up, Yoendrys Gomez and Steven Wilson. Not guys that are amazing pitchers, but they're big league pitchers. They're decent enough to help you out in the bullpen that they would have helped the 2026 White Sox. They gave that up for, again, because a guy that needed a runway. That's why on the flip side, like, do they have like a Mark Vientos? Like the Mets might be a more realistic trade partner when I was like that. But would the Reds have any young talent that just hasn't had a runway that could maybe entice, Chris Getz?
Can I introduce you to Christian Encarnacion Strand? He is not listed on a prospect list right now because he is not prospect eligible. He's played enough in the major leagues to get rid of that moniker. He will be 26 next year, so it's not as if he's crazy young, but the profile on him is plus power. The problem with him is plate discipline and just making sure he doesn't swing at everything that's coming plateward. But he's a guy that it feels like has been passed up by Sal Stewart, because the Reds need to figure out where Sal Stewart's going to play, because he deserves everyday playing time in 2026. And with Ke'Bryan Hayes playing at third base, it kind of feels like first base is where Sal Stewart's going to go. Christian Encarnacion Strand tried a little bit of third base last year. It wasn't a great fit. He didn't look as comfortable there as he looked at first base, but he has that in his bag that he can play both corners, obviously DH too. And he's got a ton of power, but it doesn't feel like there's an avenue for playing time for him, at least significantly, without some sort of injury to somebody else, to get on the major league roster. And we're talking about a guy that has 501 career plate appearances in 3 seasons, but he has a negative WAR. So I think that fits the bill, where it's like he's been given somewhat of a runway, but we're not talking about, we're not talking about a runway at O'Hare or something like that here. Like he needs a little bit more time. So I wonder about him and maybe Edwin Arroyo, or him and Chase Petty as a possible option there. But you're right, like it's definitely not as enticing as a Mark Vientos.
Well, Strand, I do believe the White Sox, at least, I think it was the previous management, were interested. I think there was some rumors of them trying to trade for him at one point, if I'm trying to recall it correctly. I know they wanted Jonathan India. If Jonathan India was still around, you could probably have gotten a deal done, but obviously that's long gone. But, that is probably the profile that they're looking for. A guy that's maybe, obviously he's had 500 at bats, a little bit more, but only in one season. But that might be something enticing, because, again, that's what they've been trading for when it comes to big league talent. Some guys that have been given some cups of coffee, have been given a little run, but not like, here's, a guaranteed 600 bats. Let's see what you can do. And the other thing is they're very confident in their hitting director, Ryan Fuller, who does preach plate approach. And one of the things that some people are speculating that has kind of zapped Luis Robert Jr.'s power is he's trying to be more judicious at what he swings at. So that's one of the things that maybe he is selling out, having a better eye, and he has had a better eye, except for he still gets out, by, pitch him down and in, down and away, and then just low in the strike zone. That is still how he will strike out, and he will strike out often, but they've kind of traded that off. So maybe that is an idea. It just, the other reason why I bring it up was one of the rumors was Mark Vientos last trade deadline for the Mets, but obviously that did not get anywhere.
That'll do it for this edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Coming up on tomorrow's show, there is one big question around the idea of signing Kyle Schwarber. We'll answer that question on tomorrow's podcast. Make sure you join me then. Make sure you hit subscribe, become an everydayer. Make us your first listen every single day. Really appreciate all of our everydayers out there. Right now, we're talking Reds every single day all throughout the off season, so you'll get at least 30 minutes of Reds talk here each and every day. Now make sure you go check out Locked On MLB. Sully's got you covered for views around the league and plenty of takes with all of the historical references and on all of his pop culture references as well. Really weaves that all in beautifully. That's all in Locked On MLB. It's just like Locked On Reds. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day, and the #1 sports podcast network in the country. But as for Steve and his cruise ship and myself, you can bet that we will be Locked On Reds every single day.